What's PPE? What is it?
Personal protective equipment.
Well, that's what it stands for. What exactly money consists of?
Gloves,
Okay,
safety
gloves,
glasses,
suits, masks, booties,
Full face, anything for, depending on the specific category.
warm underwear.
Or what?
Warm underwear.
Could be.
Could be.
Could be, right? Could this be considered PPE, what I have on right now?
no.
Yeah, no.
Absolutely. There's different classifications, there's different levels. You have a Class A, a Class B, a Class C, and a Class D. This is considered a Class D. So if I was dressed like this with steel-toed work boots on, I'd be considered having a Class D uniform on right now. Right? That's the first level of protection. Now, quick little question about that. Is PPE your first line of defense to utilize
Yes.
in a PPE situation?
Yes.
Would it be putting on your gear and having your gear available?
Yes.
So does everybody say yes?
No.
Correct. The answer is actually no. And we'll get into that, and we'll explain that. It's one of the reasons why we use the slideshow. There's what's called a hierarchy of PPE. There's different levels, there's things that start with eliminations, substitutions, in order to understand when PPE is to be actually used, right? We don't just all of a sudden look at a situation and say, this requires me to put PPE on, right? There's a ton of things that we want to look at. There's a ton of things that we want to see if we can eliminate, substitute, use what's called engineering or administrative sides of PPE. And then, once we've exhausted all of our resources there, then we would revert to wearing PPE, all right? So a couple things we get into. So some things we're gonna talk about, obviously job hazards. We got noise levels, right? So that will fall under hearing protection. You have chemicals, accidental impacts, sharp objects, flying particles, dust and mists, they're very important, right? Because we also need to understand, and we'll get into this as we go a little bit further, how are we affected? You know, inhalation, ingestion, you know, different routes of entry into the body, they're all very important. So from there we have, you know, even bright lights, down to bright lights and vibration. What could vibration cause? You're on a jack, let's say you're on a jackhammer and you constantly go like this. What is that?
Heart attack.
Yeah. Beyond that, what else could it be too? I mean, that's a very critical one. Yeah, absolutely. What else?
It cause carpal tunnel.
It can. Yeah, your hands will swell up for a long period of time, go completely white. There's a disease that follows that after that can make that continuously happen without you even realizing it. Arthritis, right? So when you're dealing with PPE and personal protective equipment, you have to take it serious. Back in 1970, it was established by OSHA in order to protect the employee in the work environment, right? So it's not something to take, you know, just lightly and recognize that you have a bag with a couple pieces of material in it that every now and then you might need because something's just dirty, right? How often do we get to jobs? We'll take Manheim, for example, right? Before we get into the rest of the slides. You take Manheim, we walk to the vehicle, we walk to the car, we look at the vehicle from the front of it, we realize that it's a bio car, and there's potential for mold. Now, how does it look to the customer when we open the doors with no mask on, with no gloves on, with no nothing, and we start performing work services on that vehicle?
It's not professional.
Well, it's not professional for
Not
one,
safe.
but number two, why do they even need our services?
Right. They get it done themselves.
If we're fearless in that sense, why would they even want to have our services? Right? It's a little odd to think about. So, vibrations, we got into that. So we'll keep carrying on. So we're going to talk about introduction, which we already kind of did. We'll get into history a little bit, requirements, OSHA and ANSI, when PPE is necessary, selecting the proper PPE, limitations, proper care. When you put it on and off, it's called donning and doffing, or doffing, however you want to say it. But it's obviously an odd little term that they use, and we'll talk about cleaning too, because cleaning is important. So back in 1970, what happened was OSHA got together and they created the they are the Occupational Safe and Health Act of 1970. So that was created to ensure safe and healthy working environment and conditions through men and women by authorizing enforcement of standards developed under the act by assisting and encouraging the states in their efforts to ensure safe and healthful working conditions, okay? And then it takes it a step further. So this is at the federal level. So not only does your company have requirements at the federal level, they're also viewed on a state level too. Does anyone know who oversees at the state level? So the importance of that in understanding is when you have the federal government that oversees that under OSHA, and then you have the state level, you have two governing bodies that can anytime walk into our business and demand to see what we issue and what you guys have available within your service at your job to make sure that you're protected. Also at the same time, they have full authority to ask Peter for a copy of these yearly sheets. The yearly sheet shows that you've refreshed this every year. That should consist of PPE. It should also consist of things like bloodborne pathogens and all of those different training modules, right? So it's important to take it serious. The Code of Federal Regulations are all considered CFRs if you've ever heard of that. If you ever want to dig deep, you want to learn about PPE on a further level, what you can do is you can jump in and you'll see every code starts with a CFR. It's a 1910 point something else. But you'll see eye and face protection, foot protection, general requirements, hand protection. They all go into specifics of the rules and regulations of what you should be doing and what you can't be doing, okay? So New Jersey's role falls under the New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce Development, which is the DOLWD, and the New Jersey Department of Health. They both share jurisdiction over top of PPE and PPE issues. In a workforce, if it's a PPE requirement, if somebody gets injured or hurt, they will do an investigation. Because technically they're supposed to be reported to the state when something happens. So then they come down and will actually do an investigation. Some important things: prevent unnecessary injury in the workplace, protect employees from excessive biochemical exposure, and prevent the spread of germs and infectious disease, including COVID-19, which you guys spent a lot of time diving into COVID-19. All of these improve the employee's productivity and efficiency, right? So hazards exist in every workplace, many different forms. You have sharp edges, falling objects, sparks, chemicals, noise, madrid of other potentially dangerous situations. We talked about the Occupational Safe and Healthy Administration. OSHA requires that employees protect their employees from workplace hazards that can cause injuries. Now, in your line of business and work that you do, name me some things that fall under where we're talking about. Falling objects, sharp edges. What could that consist of?
You could step on a rusty nail,
Right?
sheetrock, wall, ceiling,
Yep.
outlets.
Outlets. So electrical issues, right? What else? You're in garages, you're pulling sheetrock down. What's above sheetrock could potentially be
Insulation.
Right, not only insulation, but what else could be up there?
Wire.
Maybe we missed realizing that there's a box full of weights up there. You start ripping the roof down. So in that kind of environment, what would be something that we want to make sure that we have on?
Hard hat.
Something to protect our head, right? So talking about PPE, this is where I wanted to get into this so you're totally aware of how this works. I'll read the last sentence first. PPE is the last line of defense when all other safety barriers of the hierarchy risk controls have been breached. So those controls, I'm going to spend some time, especially considering the two crew chiefs. You'll be kind of responsible for this too and seeing this, how this lays out. It's very simple if you understand the concept when you end up getting to PPE, okay? So these are examples. Obviously, we talked about head protection. We talked about respiratory protection. There's body protection. There's foot protection, hand protection, hearing protection, and eye protection, right? Now, this goes into multitude of different styles of PPE that you could wear, which a lot of times is just basically job specific, right? So for example, if we talk about head protection, not all head protection is the same, right? So there could be different styles and different models. What a firefighter wear for his head protection would be totally different than what you put on for protection. But the protection exists, right? Same thing with respiratory protection. The respirators that you guys use over here have the filters, completely different than somebody that's going to be in, for example, like a level class A suit with an SCBA, a self-contained breathing apparatus. You guys won't get to that point on an A level because you have to go through a full 80-hour training in order to be able to do that, in order to work in those conditions. Things you should know when we leave here is your limitations, how to use it, when to use it, how to inspect it, how to replace it, and how to clean and store it. Cleaning it is extremely important because that's your lifeline, right? It's what protects you from getting sick or hurt. The four major routes of entry into the body when we're dealing with PPE consist of inhalation, skin absorption, ingestion, and injection, okay? So some examples of those could be, let's talk about inhalation. Tell me how that happens. And let's discuss it amongst your business. Give me some examples.
Breathing in toxic fumes.
Right, so that could be, give me some examples of what they could consist of.
Could be a gas leak in a house.
Yeah? Not that gas would be harmful, right? Certain gases
So-
could be harmful.
Carbon monoxide.
Carbon monoxide.
Could some of our, like.
Think about some things that are very apparent in your business and your job. I gave Manheim as an example.
Chemicals like.
Mold.
Mold.
What's interesting about mold? Does mold affect and hurt everyone?
Yes.
No,
Oh, really?
no. Mold is specific to your body's reactions to the specific spores and strands that are in that mold. Mold will react differently to me than it will to you. So you don't know what you're dealing with. So you should always have something covering your face when you're doing it, right? One specific mold strand that doesn't bother anyone in this room, Casey could end up breathing it in and have a complete respiratory issue from that because that's her body reacted to that spore, okay? So let's talk about skin absorption. What could that be? What could that consist of?
I mean, mixing chemicals.
Yep, keep going. So we're mixing ServPro chemicals without having,
Gloves on. Chemical gloves.
Right.
Spore resistant.
right, so let's start with that right there, right? So we're mixing chemicals without gloves on. By a show of hands, the chemicals that we use in our business, who knows what the chemical compounds are, what's in them, and what they do? Raise your hand. Not one of you. Now raise your hand if you all wear gloves when you mix them. So that's 1 of 5. So we're mixing products not knowing what the products are, right? So that can be a problem. Especially mixing compounds that could go together, could not go together. That creates another problem. So if I'm taking 2 chemical compounds and I put them together and I mix them together, right? Now, they're ServPro products, so I may not think to myself that, what's the harm that's gonna happen? These 2 products can go together. Well, now I mix them together, I splash it onto myself. I could have an issue through what? Absorption, but what have I also created an issue with? Inhalation. Those 2 chemicals could off gas. True story. On the Seaburn team, we had a call to a woman that was dead in her shed. The husband killed her. How did he do it? They had a pool. So what he would do is, and this will give you an example of things that you walk into without realizing the situations. Had a pool. He stored the chlorine purposely in the shed. Well, when the temperatures start reaching a certain point, what happens to the chlorine if it comes in contact with water? It has a chemical reaction, it off gases. The parts per million in the off gas will kill you in seconds. So if chlorine is stored in a confined space, comes in contact with any form of moisture or water, starts to off gas, and that door gets open, what it'll do is it'll create pulmonary edema in your lungs. You'll breathe it in, and your lungs will start filling up with water immediately.
You suffocate.
Yes. And you'll end up suffocating.
Right.
So things to be cautious of and think about. You know, how often do you walk into buildings that we have to do work on? Has anyone ever walked into, have you ever seen a meth lab yet or walked into a meth lab?
No, they don't like to kill you.
They exist. And different levels of meth labs can look completely different than if you were in, you know, maybe a remote area. Because a lot of those, believe it or not, meth labs and things of that nature happen in a lot more remote areas than they do in city areas, right? Ingestion. Now, we're not eating chemicals, but what can happen with ingestion?
We could spray something in the back cars and we inhale it or.
You're not wearing a respirator, and then anything you're spraying, you're ingesting.
Take it a step further. keep going, keep thinking, you guys are on the right track. I'm gonna give you an example, and then you guys come up with another one. As we're sitting here right now, I'm cleaning this table with a product, and then I take my hands and I go like this, I move the table, I don't know what the product is, and then I was like, oh, you know what, yeah, let me get this donut, and I take the donut. Now my contaminated hands is on the donut, and now I'm eating the donut. So I just gave the chemical the ability to be ingested into my body.
If you're not cleaning your equipment and you're touching, you're cross-contaminating it.
Bingo. Cross-contamination is a huge word, right? That goes down into the cleaning process, and we'll talk about that, and it also goes down into the decon process and how that works. We'll briefly touch on that. And then what about injection? How could that happen?
If you get stabbed by something, like if you're cleaning your man-on car, you get stabbed by a needle, or if he punctures your equipment.
What else? Anything else?
Bugs?
You get cut by you're pulling out hardwood, you get cut by the flooring, you get a splinter.
Rusty needles.
What about even down to rusty nails?
That's what I said.
Rusty nails are on a floorboard, and we don't have steel shank bottom shoes on, and we step on that nail, and that nail goes through our foot. But yet we were there that whole day doing a lead cleaning job.
Yeah, now you gotta let it, yeah.
Now you have those air particles. You have to remember too, when things become friable and pliable and they turn into mist and vapors, they have to settle somewhere, right? Here's the most important thing I want to teach you guys is this. Who's got loved ones at home?
All of us.
Who's got little babies at home? Right? So all of these things that we deal with every day, if you don't take it serious, you take it home to them. Especially fire jobs. If you're doing fire jobs and you're cleaning fire jobs and you're cleaning soot, the cancer-causing carcinogens that's in that soot causes cancer. It's very, very, very bad stuff. You have to take that serious, right? Because you're taking it home to your family. It has to stay here at work. It's got to be done. Like, that's the importance of that. All right, so we talked about inhalation, we talked about skin absorption, ingestion, and injection. Keep moving along. Give you an idea here, and I got to get closer to be able to read this. So come on this side. They state that 84% of workers who go through with head injuries were not wearing head protection. So 84% didn't have any head protection on. 50% of serious eye issues, was because they didn't have any goggles or face shield on. 99% of all induced hearing problems was because they didn't have any hearing protection. 25% on gloves, 25% on boots. Why is it only 25% on gloves and boots?
Very good.
Why is it? Why is that number lower than all the rest of the
Because
numbers?
that's something you wear every day to work.
Remember I started with a Class D,
Yeah.
right? So a Class D already has a start at boots, right? So you're halfway there, especially if you come in here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we can't come in here and work with sneakers on, right?
No, of course.
Yeah, we're not allowed to have sneakers on. It is highly recommended, you should have steel-toed boots, okay? So if you don't have steel-toed boots and you can start saving your money for a new pair of boots, go in that direction. Because crushed toes are not fun.
Tell me about it.
But that's one of the reasons why these two numbers are so low. Because they're the most obvious. They're the most obvious we protect our feet and our hands. Everyone always says, I can hear fine.
To the game. No.
Listen, I've been playing drums for almost 40 years. And I never wore hearing protection for the longest time. And then I started, and there's times when I get done and all I say, what? Huh? What? What'd you say? It's bad stuff. So stay on top of that. This is the hierarchy of what we're talking about. So I want to explain to you what this means. So you have elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, and then your last line of defense is your PPE, right? So what does this mean? In elimination, can we physically remove the hazard? Can the hazard be physically removed first? So here's the thing. If this room has a contaminant in it, and I can effectively come in and remove it, I would want to do that before I have a team come in all dressed up and put them at risk, right? So can we eliminate that source? Substitution, can we replace the hazard? Now, how would replacing a hazard, what would that mean?
Probably like if there's like a hole in the floor, like covering the floor.
Go
Like
products.
that would-
Let's think products. Let's think our mind on products. What could be a quick substitute? I'm going to give you a good example.
Like
of what could be a quick
disinfectant.
substitution. Great. All right. So let's say there's two choices. Let's say Steve goes and does a bed bug job, and he's all the way up to here, right? Now there's two things that we could use on him if we wanted to decon him. So we put him in a baby swimming pool. We could spray him with straight bleach or bleach 1 part water, and then spray him down with water, and then all that water goes into the swimming pool. When he steps out, he gets scrubbed. That's decontamination, right? Now that's bleach. So what does bleach do? Bleach off gases. There's a whole issue.
It's toxic.
It's an oxidizer, right? Now, what would happen if I was able to figure out a way through substitution and elimination, doing the same thing, but instead of utilizing bleach, I changed it up, and now I went to be able to use straight vinegar, and it'll do the same trick. Now, what I want to go through the process of saying, well, the bleach is the easiest because it's what I have, so let me throw my suit on, my respirator, let me work through the bleach and spray him down, or would I go to option B and utilize the vinegar, and then not have to worry about the majority of that? That would be a substitution. That would be a way of doing something different, you know? So you eliminate and replace that hazard. Engineering controls. You isolate people from the hazard. Okay? So that's engineering controls comes into isolating people from the hazard. Administrative controls has to do with us at this level. So we're the ones that change the way people work. That's one of the things we're doing right now. So what you're doing right now in this training session is you're in the administrative controls of the hierarchy of PPE. Because you're learning what you need to wear, when you need to wear it, and what you need to do. And then last, we have protect the worker with personal protective equipment. So engineering controls, controlling a hazard at its source is the best way to protect the employee. Depending on the hazard or work conditions, OSHA recommends the use of engineering or workplace practice controls to manage or eliminate hazards to the greatest extent as possible. For example, and you guys do this, building a barrier between the hazard and the employees is an engineering control. Where do we do that?
Containment.
Right? Could that fall into that category?
Yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. Administrative controls. Change the way in which employees perform their work. Training, education, policy, which is important, which we're going to talk about when we're done. Job rotations. What's job rotations? Job rotations would be in and out, right? So if you're in a long situation of working, let's say there's a job that comes in and that job is a 24-hour straight job. Would we want to have the same individual work those 24 hours? Because what starts to happen? Fatigue starts to set in. So it would be foolish of us on an administrative side, administrative control, to allow that employee to keep working. It's the same thing in a confined space, for example. Confined space, if we have a confined space, we're sending you into a crawl space or a tunnel that requires constant airflow to remove carbon dioxide so you don't end up passing out, right? That's an engineering control, but on the administrative side of it, we would make sure that you're only in there for 20 minutes at a time. You should be in and out within 20 minutes. First guy in 20 minutes, he's out. Next guy in 20 minutes, he's out. Next guy in 20 minutes, he's out. That works on the administrative side of things. I don't leave the same guy in there for 2-3 hours or 6 hours for his full workday. Okay? That's an example. Elimination controls. Elimination removes the hazard from the source. This could include changing the work process to stop using a toxic chemical. That was the example of the bleach and the vinegar that we just talked about. Heavy object or sharp tool is the preferred solution to protect workers because no exposure can occur. You understand what they're saying there?
Yeah.
What they're saying is correct. So if elimination removes the hazard at the source, no exposure can even happen. Substitution controls, we talked about that in the beginning. It's using a safer alternative to the source of the hazard. An example is using a non-toxic as a substitute for solvent-based cleaners, right? Every cleaner that is created, or every chemical that's created in your line of work has an SDS sheet, or in an OSHA side is an MSDS sheet, material safety data sheet. That will tell you all the compounds that are in that specific chemical. You can also take that and cross-reference that with an ERG book, which will then tell you what that chemical does, how it reacts, you know, what the inhalation is. If you guys ever want to read one of those, I can bring one of those in and drop it out. It's actually really interesting for you to read. You'll be able to find everything that you do with ServPro. If you look through the chemical list, you'll be able to find those chemicals, go into the ERG book and see what that chemical actually does. That book is used for on-scene incident commanders when you get to a hazmat scene and you have to evacuate. There's so many chemicals out there, we don't know what they are. There's placards on the back of, you know, 1006, 1056 of gasoline, you tanker driving down the road with gasoline, that thing falls over and it spills. Well, how do you handle that situation? You reference the ERG book, you open it up, it'll tell you how far you evacuate the area, right? So this goes so far in depth beyond the scope of our work that we're touching the surface of what we have here, okay? Now, I've gone through and I popped out some images, some are ServPro images, just for you to take a look at. Now, I know this was probably a situation where we were just doing like a little bit of a photo shoot, but I want to ask, what is in this picture here? What's wrong with that picture? In a perfect scenario, they were getting ready to go into a hot zone. Any area that is considered contaminant should be called a hot zone, right? Outside of that, you have a warm zone, then you have your green zone outside of that. So what do you see wrong with this here?
They should have put that equipment on in a separate room that's disinfected, and then they would enter the hot zone.
Use your eyes.
He's not zipped up all the way?
Bingo. So here's a question. Ruben, is this you?
No,
Does anyone know this?
that's the kid I used to work with.
Oh, okay. So if you look at him, he's zipped all the way up to here, right? Face is open. This one here, it's unzipped, right? So if there is what exactly is this doing?
Nothing.
They created the zippers to go up and down for a reason, right? They created them to go all the way up. Because then we're going to talk about taping things after that. So he's close, but let's say he gets contaminated. What does he have hanging out the front of his face?
His beard?
Right. So if his beard is hanging out, what does that create? What issues does that create? Besides absorption, what else could it create? Absorption issues, irritation, right?
Cross-contamination
Right? Cross-contamination to who?
to other people.
Everybody.
Like his child when he goes home and he walks in the door and the child comes running to him and says, "Hey, Daddy," and he bends down and picks the child up and gives him a hug with the beard that he just spent in a mold-infested house or room, right? You may not think that's a big deal, but that child could have a specific reaction to any of those spores, right? What's wrong with this picture over here?
The hood's on? Can't really see.
Again, if we leave things in the open position, now there is going to be times when you can do that, right? There's that old saying of common sense, but when it comes to common sense in PPE issues and in CBRN and hazmat issues or chemical issues, common sense is a conversation with your supervisor. That's all common sense is, right? It is okay to say, "Hey, listen, I feel like I should be doing this. What is our plan?" That's what I want you to do, right? And that's where Steve comes in, right? You'll have Steve, and then from Steve, there would be crew chiefs, right? Am I in the right order?
The other way around.
No,
Who keeps them?
Okay, so it would work in that order, right? Find out, talk, communicate. Now, this is Manheim. What is the potential issue with this car right here that you already see?
Mold.
Okay. So, I wanna give you an idea. Here's this car sitting here that's listed bio and mold on it, right? Now I'm there, the ServPro professional. I walk up, I open the door, and I just start cleaning. Anything wrong with that?
No mask, no
No,
gloves.
it's just,
You need to let it air out, get some particles.
We talked about this the other day. One thing you can do, if you realize that you're working and cleaning one car, if you know what the next car is, get over there and start prepping it. Open the doors. And leave the doors of that car open. What do you know that you need to have in order for mold to even grow?
Water.
And
Humidity.
darkness, and what else? No
No air.
airflow. Airflow is huge, right? So open the doors, let that air out. Everything is recorded in parts per million, right? So if I can open those doors and get airflow through there, the parts per million go down. But again, you're all mold experts, right? What kind of mold is that? What is it? So why would I ever want to stick my head in there without having an N95 mask on? I don't know what that hazard is. I don't know if that hazard's going to affect me. And I don't know if I'm going to take that hazard back to my family when I'm done working. If it was me personally, if my head was in here and I was working through all of these, when I was done at the end of the day, I would make sure that when I came back to the office, I would utilize the bathroom and I would wash my face to make sure that I'm not taking that stuff home. That's one of the most important things to understand. Now, again, through this area, through here, through these areas, what should we be looking for besides a mask?
Essential hazards.
Which could be,
Needles, anything really. Trash.
how do we eliminate needles?
We gotta put them in a red needle container.
So let's think about it this way. We can't eliminate needles, right? We can't eliminate them because they're already there. So I can't eliminate the source, I can't substitute it. So I need to realize that my level of defense is gonna have to be PPE. Because somebody's gotta get that needle out of there. But sometimes we don't know the needle exists. So will the needle stop a nitrate glove or a latex glove? No. And I will tell you this, 100%. The first time your hand gets stuck with a needle that you don't know who that belongs to, you're gonna be very, very unpleasant and unhappy. Especially the protocols where you're gonna have to follow after that. Does anybody know what that consists of? Weeks and weeks and months of testing.
Yeah.
Hepatitis A, hepatitis B, HIV. They're all protocols that incident would have to be reported, and they're the protocols that we followed up on that you have to do. Right? Take that serious. I'll give you a name of a glove. If you guys want to buy a glove, they're 100% puncture proof, they're 100% cut proof, and you can work with these gloves and they're very inexpensive. Okay? You can go on Amazon, you can go on any fire store, find yourself what's called extrication gloves, right? Ringer makes them, Ringer extrication gloves. They're perfect for this business. 100% perfect, you can get them for 35 bucks and less, okay? They will protect your hands from everything. You could literally take the Ringer gloves and put your hand through the window and take the glass and go like this in your hands all day long. It will cause no issues to you at all.
Huh.
Something to look into. What's some of the issues that we could run into here?
Rusty nails.
Yep.
Well, that's not, is that a, just to
Things from
clarify,
this is a garage.
is that a fire loss or? is-
No, this is just a garage. These are garages.
Electrical issue.
You got those issues, but what's this? What's in here?
Heat.
It's here, it's here, it's here, it's here, it's here.
Random.
What's on that shelf?
Random chemicals.
And we know being in residential homes is the worst Because Harry homeowner puts whatever chemical he wants on those shelves, whether those chemicals can be within range of each other or not, right? So we don't technically always know what that situation holds. You have tripping hazards. You have fall hazards from the ceiling. You can't see it in this image. I tried to get in here, but on this particular job, the ceiling was open on a pull down, like the attic area. It looks like you guys are doing some kind of work up in there. So just things to think about, be mindful of. What about this one?
Is this a burn?
Everything.
So soot,
Yeah, soot. Yeah.
that looks like this garbage, like,
Stuff from the
I can't
ceiling?
really make out what's in the picture, but it looks like garbage.
How does this room end up like this, besides fire? How does it look like this?
Neglect.
Hmm?
Neglect.
Heat, right? Heat and fire causes what?
Soot.
Right? So, now, when that soot starts to build, as the temperature starts to increase in this room, the soot and the smoke
Expand.
take all the contents in that room with it, okay? So, let's look at this room, for example. What's the carpet made out of?
Plastic.
What's the tables made out of? What's the chairs made out of?
Wood.
What's the tables here made out of?
Plastic. Plastic. and
So when it
metal.
burns, you're inhaling all that.
All of that is what's stuck on those walls, right? 9 times out of 10, for a room to be completely black like this, the temperature got over 1800 degrees and it did what's called flash. So what it does is, as the fire starts to consume, it needs oxygen to breathe, right?
Yeah.
So at the same time, that's its fuel. So as it's consuming the products, it's creating byproducts, which is then thrown to the walls. Now what happens is the temperature in the room, if it's not ventilated, gets so high and so hot fast that the room will take all the superheated gases and explode it within that room. And that's what you end up with. It's a quick flash. But everything in here has now been consumed. So every time you walk through here, you're making what? Dust, particles, vapor, mist, all of those different things, right? Every time you walk through that room, every time you brush against something. Should this, but what PPE level should this be?
Okay.
Well, you guys are only probably low B and down to D. A, just take that out of your mind. You won't be using it. A's are extremely tight rubber suits. They're big tops up here. You won't be using those. That's a lot of radiological stuff. What's that?
So you'll be wearing a B, grade B.
Yeah, everything that you have in your bag will be required to be, should be required to be in here. Including a hard hat. Why?
Yeah,
Stuff from the ceiling.
There's stuff hanging from the ceiling,
Yeah.
you know? The room's destroyed.
Unstable.
These are the most important ones because this is the cancer-causing stuff. This is all the chemicals that have burned and then are slapped to those walls, right? Couches, your carpets, polyester, polycarbonate, all those different things are bad chemicals when they burn. What about this one?
That's a order.
Yeah.
Bio, so
Well, what are some things that we have to take in consideration? Just looking at this source, Brian, if you're the crew chief and you get to this job and you see this stuff here, right? What are we prepping our crew? What are we prepping them on for the day? What are we trying to
Well,
let
you
them
have to
know?
wear like PP gloves,
Right?
you have the suit, booties, mask. What am I missing?
You good there? Hmm? Pretty much good there.
I think so.
So, yeah, in a situation like that, if you're putting the suit on and you're just looking at this, right? Would it make sense to say, well, I don't really need to pull the hood up. It's not a big deal. I can just zip it up and tape it here, right? I can leave the hood down. Would you guys do that?
Not a border house like that.
You don't know what's in there.
You don't know. I mean, eventually, you could get to the point where the crew chief or Steve could make that decision, right? After we've gone through some of the elimination process, all those different things, we could make that call at that point. But you wanna go with the hoods up, everything zipped, everything taped, and then work backwards from there, right? It's easier to take away than it is to put on when you've already been exposed to something. Yeah. What do we do with this one?
Go home.
Well, that's definitely not an option. So this, that's all blood, you got blood down here. So now we have bloodborne pathogen issues, right? So what are some of the things we have to think about when we look at that? The eliminations that what are some of the things we could come in, if we come in contact with that? Hepatitis A, hepatitis B, HIV, what else? The whole slew of them.
You gonorrhea or anything.
Well, that's a sexually transmitted disease.
Cross-contamination.
Close.
Cross-contamination. You can get it. That's the big thing, cross-contamination.
Yeah.
You can affect somebody else.
And what about this mess over here?
Feces is it's the same thing.
Well, we got soda bottles.
I can't see that from here.
There's soda bottles all
They look
up
like
here. There's
feces.
soda bottles all up here, and that's just a big explosion of just something. This was a bad, yeah, exactly. So in this situation, I mean, I would be fully suited up, because I don't know what any of that stuff is.
You don't know what's in the bottles.
We don't know what's in the bottles. We gotta clean that stuff. And that's the other thing too, like if you walk in a situation like this and you don't know what any of that stuff is, you have to let somebody know before you just start chucking things and throwing things. This could be methamphetamine to the liquid form before it's cooked down. You don't know, right? That's a pretty nasty pickup.
Is that a job? That's not a job.
These are jobs. Steve did these, right? So, correct me if I'm wrong, this one and this one was a suicide attempt, right? And this one was somebody that had cancer
Committed suicide.
and committed suicide.
She actually did it. Oh.
So what is that, like chunks in the sink?
So immediately looking at this, we have a blood hazard. We've got a blood hazard here and a blood hazard here. Bloodborne pathogens. We're back into the bio issue again, right? That is everything, full feet, everything, right? Because all it takes is a drop.
Not just for you, but for whoever.
And it can become
Clothes.
airborne. Right, absolutely. Now you're thinking, because I hear you keep talking about that. That's what I want, the biggest thing that I want you to take home is everything has to stay here, right? This is where it's contained. But you have to do those parts of the policy in order to make good things happen, so you're not affecting your family and yourself when you leave. Same thing with this one, full suit, that would be a full suit. Anybody know what this is? This is one of my pictures. This is a legitimate picture. That is a meth lab in Paulsboro, New Jersey.
Oh, yeah.
So the reason you can tell is number one,
Crock-Pot.
all the crock pots, the rice cooker, the chemical sources down here, and the brake cleaner. Like, who has those next to the rice cooker? So now you walk up to an attic, you're in another meth lab. This is another one in the Paulsboro area. But you look at this, you don't even realize what's here, right? So you're looking at this and you're just seeing a couple bottles, right? But here's a solvent that shouldn't be in this mix. But we walk you into a respirator, we don't know what the situation is. We could immediately be found on the floor in that kind of situation. Or one of you guys, I'll be very blunt with this, could walk up into that attic with the rest of your crew in the house And you can walk over to that, and you can be like, oh, there's nobody here. You pull out your vape, and you hit that vape, and then you blow it. You blew yourself up in a whole entire house as soon as that spark of that battery hits.
Come on, Marcus, you should go.
I would kill you, man.
Just saying, just things to think
I
about.
know, now,
So I'll talk about cleaning PPE real quick, and then we're gonna get into actually putting it on and what's in your bags and some of the things that we're gonna do going forward, okay? So the easiest thing I can tell you about PPE is this. It should be cleaned after every use, right? Your PPE and your PPE bag should also be inspected daily before you start your work, right? So when you get your PPE bag, you have your PPE bag, open it up, take a look, make sure everything's okay. Sometimes if things are stored in bags for a period of time, if it gets in the direct sun, it sits in the bag, it gets too hot, these parts can start to break down. All this stuff will start to break down eventually, okay? So here's the rule of thumb, and this makes it so simple. When you clean PPE, you're cleaning it to the manufacturer's suggested specifications, right? If you can't find it, it is always this: mild soap and water. Mild soap and warm water. That's it. Don't ever, ever, ever take anything like this or anything like this and take Simple Green and start spraying it all over here. Mild soap and water. Why? Because you're putting this on your face.
It's not harmful.
Because you're putting this on your face, right? So I'm not gonna take bleach and clean this because it was dirty and then stick this on my face. Mild soap and water, right? All right. So I want to show you guys this. Just give me a second here. I want to swap this over. This will make my life and Steve's life real easy too, if I can make this happen. Just give me a second. Both of these, please.
Audio, 1 of 1.
Personal
0, elapsed.
Don't mind that.
is used to provide thermal and respiratory protection to team members entering a work area where biological or infectious contamination is present or suspected to be present, and when remediation or cleaning is being performed. Appropriate PPE should be used to protect team members from possible inhalation, ingestion, skin or eye contact with microorganisms and their byproducts, as well as chemicals or other substances that may be applied or handled in the course of restoration or remediation work. The selection of PPE depends on the anticipated exposure, types of microbial contamination, activities to be completed, and potential hazards of chemicals that may be used in the restoration process. All team members shall be properly trained in the use of the PPE being provided, as well as proper hazard awareness with respect to the hazard involved. Consult an IEP or other specialized expert if there is a question regarding PPE selection. PPE may consist of a respirator, eye protection, disposable coveralls including hood and booties, foot protection, hand protection, head protection, hearing protection, and fall protection. In this video, you will see the steps to properly don or put on and doff or remove a half-face respirator, eye protection, disposable coveralls, and gloves. Again, selection of the appropriate PPE may differ from what is demonstrated in the following video based on the contaminant present or suspected to be present and the cleaning or remediation work required. Once PPE is selected, it should be inspected to ensure it is in good working order and ready for use. Prior to beginning the donning process, you will want to prepare 2 pieces of duct tape tape for sealing your gloves to the coveralls.
We're gonna talk about that, that's called the
By
Bordentown.
putting on the coveralls. You see, these particular coveralls have an attached booty that is pulled over the technician's work shoe. Once the coveralls are on, raise and lower your arms and perform a deep knee bend to ensure the suit allows adequate room and good range of motion without tearing. Next, you will put on your first layer of gloves, or the inner gloves. Pull the coverall sleeve back so the glove cuff can be extended as far up the arm as possible. Now, pull the coverall sleeve over the top of the glove cuff and apply the piece of duct tape. Folding one end of the tape over will make removal easier. You want half the width of the tape on the coverall and half the width of the tape on the glove to provide a good seal. Perform this step for the left and right glove. Afterward, raise your arms over your head to ensure there is still adequate mobility after the tape is applied. Once this is complete, put on your second layer of gloves, or outer gloves. Two different color gloves, one for inner and one for outer, allows for tears to be more noticeable. Next, you will put on your respirator. Be sure to do a seal check on your respirator each time it is put on.
Learn how to do that.
After the respirator is secured, you can put on goggles. Pull the hood over your head and make sure it doesn't interfere with the respirator seal. And then zip up your coveralls. When appropriate, some technicians will prefer to wear a face shield instead of goggles. To begin the doffing process, apply a disinfectant to your outer gloves. Rub them together like you were washing your hands. Then wipe them with a disposable cloth. An EPA-registered disinfecting wipe may also be used in lieu of a spray disinfectant. You may like to open the storm flap and unzip the coveralls at this time to allow yourself to begin to cool off if necessary. Next, you will remove the outer gloves, leaving your inner gloves on. Be extremely careful not to snap your glove during the removal process, which could cause contamination to splatter. To remove the outer set of gloves, take the non-dominant glove hand and grab the outside of the other glove around the cuff, grabbing it about 1 inch from the end. Pinch the glove using a finger and thumb. Pull the glove completely off of your hand and ball it up in the gloved hand. Now, take your dominant hand and slide a finger or thumb under the cuff of the remaining outer glove. Slide the glove off your hand, grabbing the underside of the glove as you remove it. Be careful not to touch the outside or contaminated side of the glove. As you pull off the glove, allow the glove to turn inside out with the balled up first glove inside of the second glove. Then, dispose of both gloves. Next, remove the tape from the inner gloves. Grab the tape tabs, then remove and discard the tape. It is likely the tape will tear the coverall material. Now, remove your coveralls. Remove your arms and hands from the sleeves by allowing the sleeves to become inside out as you pull your hands out. Do not allow your inner gloves to come off during this process. Carefully begin rolling your coveralls down, being sure to only touch the inside of your coveralls, but not your inner clothing with your gloves. When the suit is rolled down to the ankles, carefully step out the built-in booties and discard the coveralls. Next, disinfect your inner gloves.
Technically, where he is right now, he's in a
Your
class
outer
D.
gloves. Now, remove your goggles. Pinch the strap and pull it out and away from your head, allowing the goggles to fall away from your face. Set your goggles aside for cleaning and disinfecting. Once again, disinfect your inner gloves. respirator. It is important that you do not touch the front of the respirator and to have the respirator fall away from your face. Removal procedures will vary based on the respirator selected. Once removed, set the respirator aside for cleaning and disinfecting. While still wearing your inner set of gloves, begin the cleaning and disinfecting process for your reusable PPE, like your respirator, goggles, or face shield. The procedure for cleaning and disinfecting this equipment will vary based on model, so see the manufacturer's recommended procedures for cleaning, disinfecting, and storage. Lastly, you will disinfect your gloves one more time, then remove them in the same manner in which you removed your outer gloves, and then discard them.
Is green string management?
Cost, $7.49 remaining.
It's higher ups.
Alright, anybody have any questions? Before we open up a bag and show you guys what's in there and take a look? Questions? Do you guys see an importance of this more now than
Yeah,
what you had
definitely.
before? Right.
Yeah.
Who has PPE bags and who doesn't?
I do not.
Yep.
I don't know.
Brett, you guys will eventually end up getting yours. What we're gonna start doing every day, and when you guys end up getting your PPE bags, the ones that are newer, you'll be bringing your PPE bags in with you every day as part of your book bag, as part of your, right? So just bring them in here, set them up against the wall. When you leave them up against the wall. So that when you come in the morning, they're there to pick up and take with you. You take it with you, when you come back, put it back here again. Right? So it doesn't have to go home with you or anything like that. Your own PPE bags will be set up here somewhere. Good, no questions? What do we got? Let's take a look at the bag, Steve. Do we have any, do you have any duct tape in there?
Has your stuff been properly cleaned too?
As he's going through the bag, I'll explain something to you with the tape that makes life real simple, right? You always have to make sure that you do the buddy flap. The buddy flap is that little flap at the end of the tape that gives you the ability to hold on to that to be able to pull it off. A rule of thumb is if you take the tape and you start bringing it out, you fold the first piece over. Now you've got the buddy tab attached to the tape. Take the roll of tape this way, turn your fingers to the buddy tab, and roll that tape up to here. The distance between here to here is 1.5 times the distance around here and around your ankle at the same time. So you always have plenty. Instead of pulling it out, trying to rip it, and then create a buddy tab, and then you go to put it on and it's too small. Because now if it's too small, you just ruin your suit because you're gonna have to pull it off and put even more tape on, right? So fold it over, grab it in the hand here, roll it up, let it go, rip it, and you wanna do before you start 5 pieces of it.
5.
1 for each leg, 1 for each hand, and 1 for up here. Okay? I've always been a big fan of once you get the zipper to here, you're taking a small piece and putting it across here. Okay? That's it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Have them set up. You can have them ripped off and then you attach them to a table or the side of the truck or however you got to, and then you can start putting your gear on.
Unmasked? Or
That's it.
No, not for that.
yeah.
The list we have, no. The
So again-
checklist, no. That's part of your PPE though.
Yes. What we're gonna make sure that we do. Just create a buddy tab. However you wanna do that. Sorry, that piece, I'm not gonna waste it. So we got it here, right? So I can turn this way. Now hold on to the buddy tab. That's a perfect length that I need to rip. Sorry, your tape is split.
Yeah, it's.
All right, so there's 1 piece. Now, I end up with 5 of them. The last piece, your 5th piece, can be a smaller, it doesn't only have to be about like that, right? Now, you get some really serious violent stuff, like that toilet and all that blood, I would run one straight up the middle of it too, to protect that, you know. That will eliminate the ability that if you're doing something and then God forbid that suit opens up, it won't at that point, okay? Man, this tape,
Probably old.
yeah, it's definitely old.
Yeah.
So we definitely wanna do that. Gloves. Do we have extra gloves too if we go through these and instead of, I don't wanna destroy your stuff, but. So with these guys here, as we have these gloves on,
Those are your secondary gloves.
yeah, I'm just gonna show them something.
No primary, right?
I'm sorry, the first ones are the black ones though.
Yeah.
Then,
I was putting those on first because they're more heavy duty.
I see you don't do it like the, do it differently.
They use,
I'm gonna use these
Two of those,
because I
or just
don't, I
different
shouldn't
colors?
destroy these.
The first one's like that.
But when these are on, right, and we'll talk about the sequence as we go through. I just wanna kinda show you the getting off technique. So when we're in this scenario, are we trying to, we're not trying to dig our hand under here to pull this down, right? What are we doing? We're simply doing, we're simply grabbing here. See what I did? I like grabbing here because then I can see my hands pointed away from me as compared to trying to grab here. It's harder to get off. It's easier to get off underneath. So if you can get yourself down here, and then as you come off to here, I utilize this hand in the same, and then you can, they'll be folded inside out of each other, okay? So you have two sets. You have the primary set that goes on first, and you guys are doing the black set first, or the blue
no,
set
I
first?
usually have them put the blues on
Yeah,
first
yep.
because they're heavy duty.
That's fine.
Those rip super easy.
Yep.
So those will go over top.
One thing I will tell you too, remember I was telling you guys about the extrication gloves?
Mm-hmm.
If you buy the extrication gloves, you will not need any gloves underneath them. They're 100% bloodborne pathogen protection, so there's no additional gloving that needs to go underneath. If you're, basically this material is inside the glove itself.
Okay.
Yeah, when you put it on. I'll show you pictures
And
of
they're
them when we're
reusable?
done. Absolutely, 100%. They're used for motor vehicle accidents. So obviously you're running into a lot of blood, things like that, a lot of glass, a lot of sharp objects. I'm just telling you, this business, they would be great gloves for you guys to use.
Extrication gloves.
Extrication gloves.
We're gonna
I'll show you
add
where
it
get
to
them.
the, tool list.
Yeah, and I'll show you where to get them. Basically, if you've seen the tool work gloves from like a Home Depot, right? Where they got like the things on the knuckles and underneath, that's basically what these are, but the extrication gloves are another level of protection. So, with the work gloves, if you needed a barrier underneath, there is no barrier under the work glove, so you would have to go with a primary glove first, and then the secondary glove is the work glove. If you were gonna deal in a hazard where there's, a chemical, there could be a chance of like an absorption or something like that, right? Absorbing through the skin.
Mm-hmm.
So we have two layers. We know the first set goes on, right? Of gloves. We talked about taping it. But obviously we want to put what on first? What's the first thing we want to put on?
Suit.
All right, you
Suit.
want to do this? Or?
You want to tell them about two different suits though?
Yeah, do we have anybody that wants to do this, or can they fit all into yours?
Should be alright. Two different style suits. You want to tell them about the two?
Yeah, go ahead. You
suits?
tell them about that, and I'm going to get into something else.
So, two different styles of suits. This is kind of like your normal everyday protection.
Cool.
This is for chemicals and liquids.
See what he has in his hand right there? This is a B. This is a C. This is a D. And A would be this, basically on steroids. And it's like, and you're like,
Feel the difference. Feel it. See? Cloth. This is kind of like, so whenever you're in sewage, blood.
Stephen will give you all the specific specifications on which suit you want to be putting on, if there's any questions. If there's, major biohazard issues, like, I'm not saying you're wearing that event on it, but if there's major, like blood and all that, we're definitely in something more like this, okay? Than your everyday suit.
One thing on.
Yeah, as he's putting that on, listen to me, this is really important. The process can go so much faster if you're doing it with two people. Because two people is actually required. Because what I want to do is when he gets dressed, there's areas that he can't see. I want to make sure that he's protected and there's no holes or rips or tears as he's put the PPE on, right? So as he goes through the process, he's already inspected. So as he's putting it on, you have it. What you want to do is make sure your zipper works first. All right, I got to work the zipper. Let me get in here. Make sure the armpits aren't torn. Go into the backside. Make sure you actually have a backside still there. Right now, you've got a good solid suit. Now, in the buddy system, what is my role and responsibility now? I want to make sure that once he's moved and he's checked himself out and he can physically do all this stuff, right? You simply want to come behind him, let him have his arms out, and you want to come up and you just want to check through here, right? Check in the back, and make sure that when he put this on, he didn't tear anything, because it can happen. And we don't want to have, we're on the same team, so we don't want to have anybody exposed. So then from there, where are we going? Well, sorry, I banged this one off by accident. This one's still inside out. Now what's he doing? Oh, the work's right there. He did one major work thing, huh?
So, put a glove over the suit and it goes in.
Right. And then we're gonna show you one, I'll show you one tape fold on there and how it works. So we can try not to, we don't destroy the suit.
Brian, you want to set up that tape?
Finger line.
Tape. No, that one, yeah.
Yep, go ahead, make me one. So he's gonna fold it over, he's got the buddy end going, the buddy tab.
So arm length, arms a little longer.
Yep, right to about here, right to about, in there. And then before we started, before we checked the suit, we made 5 of these, right? So now, here's the tab to be able to pull this off. If you don't have this on, you're gonna be very upset with yourself when you're gonna take this stuff off, right? It's gonna take you a long time. So the easiest thing to do is to do this for Steve. If you're by yourself, you have to do it yourself. But a lot of times, if you're inexperienced, it's hard getting this on and then trying to bring this over, because a lot of times guys will come across like this and then, oh, this just stuck to the suit, and then pulling this, and it makes life horrible. So if he just holds his arm out, you can just come through. So you want half and half, right? Half to the glove, half to the suit. Now, I'm not gonna press it because I want to save this suit. So we're coming through like this. There's the buddy tab. Obviously, this is gonna be sealed in here. I don't want to ruin the suit. And then what we do is we just check, make sure there's no separation. You know, he's good, okay? And then you have what? Other things to do is we're gonna go through it, but what would go over top of this? The next layer of glove, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's either this or even a work glove, however you want to.
I'm not gonna lie, I guess the real Breaking Bad like.
Good, I'll save this. Bottoms, you're good, there's nothing down there. Third booty you already made, right?
So,
Yeah.
question, if they're booty, you have booties on, do you still need the duct tape down there?
So, this is what
I'm gonna say yes,
yeah.
just because if you're dealing with something wet, you can see it's kind of somewhat baggy,
Yeah.
and it's slip, trip, and fall hazard.
So if you want to help Steven in that situation, and you're going to tape the bottoms, what you're going to do is you're going to come up, yeah, he's, yep. So we can end up doing the same thing, all right? Now, one thing that we've also just done is we just removed what? See, I didn't want to.
That's all right.
I don't want to remove, I remove tripping hazards, right?
Yeah.
So he's big and bulky with that on his feet down there. So by the time you start moving and sweating inside of it, you know, they're gonna shift. So it is easier to pull it a little bit tighter and then go around and create your own boot with that on the outside of it.
We got these as well. They actually have
Yep.
things to eliminate slipping and sliding.
Now, if these go over top and we decide to use these,
Yes.
that's getting taped.
That's normally
That's
what we would
100%
do.
getting
Just
taped.
put these over. I know sometimes it's a pain in the ass, and then you tape the top side, just like your gloves. That'll help you from slipping and slide.
We'll get into respirators at the end. But now what we're dealing with the top portion of that, once the respirator's on, we'll do that specifically. As the hood comes up, right, he's gonna bring the hood up, we'll pop that up. Now let's pretend the respirator's actually on. Now you see this little distance in here? That's what I talk about with a piece of tape going over top of that, okay? And it covers that area nicely and it doesn't allow things to end up getting down inside, okay? Because they can have a tendency to not be very comfortable. See how that goes up and then you can push back down? That'll hold it up there, right? You get hot there. So your more rubberized level suit, chemicals, things of that nature, the biohazard blood, you guys are using these, I would assume, right?
For the most part, a lot of stuff that we use
Yeah.
do.
In the yellow. These guys would be great for a lot more of the construction stuff. You can see that this is, right? You can see my hand through there, right? So it's a very basic level of protection, but it's the next level up from me being dressed like this, okay, with work boots on. Yes?
Are these type of suits like one and done suits? Like say you
Yes.
they're disposable after
They're not reusable.
Yeah, they should always be one and done. Now, you can get away with a level A as long as it's decon properly, because those suits are very expensive, but these guys should definitely be chucked. That's one of the reasons, because when you tape it, when you go to get it off after you've been working all day long, you know, trying to get that off, it's going to rip the arms right off of that thing. You'll probably end up tearing it. And then even though this suit right here, I was trying to eliminate trashing this suit, we'll keep this as a training suit now. We'll put it in the closet as a training suit. But see that little spot that I nicked on the bottom there? That suit is now compromised. So the whole entire suit is technically compromised. We shouldn't even be using it at that point. Okay? So the booty's gone. We tape it. We'll get into the respirator. The hood goes up, zips up, goes across, and then we work in reverse order, right? That's what we saw in the video. You're going to go backwards as you're cleaning. You're taking the stuff off. Anybody have any questions with that stuff? How much do we know about the respirators?
Enough.
How often do we
Like
use it?
how to put it on, how to secure it, and how to make sure it's sealed tight.
Yeah. How do you guys get good seals? How do good seals happen? How does the best seal happen? You dying in there? You alright? Yeah, suction. But the number one, believe it or not, and you'll laugh at this, the number one is to not have any facial hair.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you ever get certified in SCBA, you're not allowed to have facial hair.
Like firefighter.
Okay.
Yep.
Because you can't get a good seal.
I used to have to shave, so.
Which one do you use more often, Steve?
Probably half.
You guys familiar with 95s?
Yeah.
Yeah, the difference, yeah.
So they don't go on this way. They put one this way. Right? So if you look at the N95, what do you have at the top of it?
No, sorry.
Right.
And it has that flap in the front.
Right.
That's
So-
what makes it N95.
When we take this off, what's the proper way to take this off?
Pull.
I usually just rip the straps. I don't pull it up. When it's an N95, I just rip the straps.
You just grab onto it, and break the strap. on the
Break
back.
the strap, yeah. So it's not touching my face and it's not touching me. And then just take it off.
So that's an interesting way to do it. I've never seen or had anybody do that. But I guess that kind of works, just as long as you're not putting a contaminant. Make sure your hands are clean first before your contaminant goes anywhere up by your head, right? The easiest way is when this is on, is to come back through here, loop up, pull over, and then lean forward as the mask falls forward on the N95 and taking that off. Okay? Also, make sure when you get this on, that you create yourself a pinch of a seal across the nose too, right? And then how often do we use these? How often can we use these?
Once.
One time. No, you can use more than once.
Do you guys have rules on your N95s on usage?
Awesome. Huh? I usually just toss them.
Cause they're gonna
When I'm
have
done.
stuff on, you can't clean them.
Now, if we're in a preventive situation where we don't realize that there's no hazard, and we have this on, and we get in there, and then there's no hazard present, there's nothing wrong with the mask, we can utilize that again, okay? If you're in a situation and there's any suspicion of doubt that it should be required and you used it, we want to discard it, okay? But if you do run into a situation, like this mask right here, I was touching that, Steve was touching that, this mask is okay to go back into the bag, even though it's been used for training purposes today, okay? It's okay. Do you have filters or anything for your respirators?
I just have the mold filters.
All right. Do you want to cover that with them a little bit, since you guys use the halves?
So we have two styles of filters. The smaller ones here are, I believe, strictly for mold and dust particles. So whenever you're on mold loss, you're using these. And then you got the big fat ones, which are kind of like your everyday type of use. So sewage jobs and bio jobs and all those types of jobs you're using the big fat ones. So, like I said, I recommend too, if you're using bigger cartridges, it may suck, but use the full face. Just because those big cartridges on this thing, kind of like, yeah, it pulls it down and it's annoying. So this one has a lot more stability towards it, so it's a lot easier to work with. So.
Mask goes on, tops, bottoms, right? And then check for seal. Right?
Yep.
How do we check for a seal when we put our hand up there? Are we blowing, are we sucking, what are we
You
doing?
put your palm down, you breathe in.
We're all aware of that.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Should I be using these for Bordentown or should I be N95?
A 95.
So let's talk about that. What do you think you should use if you're in Manhattan?
I think it would depend on the severity of the mold.
Okay? What would be your first pick?
N95.
Good job. The picture that we had up there of the one car where there's mold all over the seats, the floors, the back, everywhere. We've gone there. What's the first thing we want to do to that car?
Air it out.
Open the door and air it out for a bit, right? Get the parts per million down. And then if we were going to go in there, it would be easier to go with the highest level of protection. If we can't do anything in a hierarchy, right? We can't eliminate, we can't substitute, we can't do anything, that stuff's there. What we're going to do is we're going to work backwards, right? We want to go with the highest level of protection until we can get to a lower level of protection, right? It's easier to go in a situation like that from this, and then eventually once we start eliminating a hazard to this, then going from this and saying, uh-oh, I got a problem, I'm not fully protected, and then trying to jump up into a different mask. Right? We've already compromised ourselves at that point. So that's a good answer. Out of those three masks, Brian, if you were doing, you're at the Trenton job and you're removing the ceiling of the floor, and it's we find out that there's some asbestos. Which one are we wearing?
The mold one, smaller cartridges, full face.
Do you agree?
No, because we don't do asbestos.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that would be, I would say the full face,
Yeah.
just to be fully protected.
Right. What about?
I had, like that car I had to do for the guy, the Manheim guy, the house was like full of mold. That would have been the small one, or just the 95? A half face?
N95.
Yeah. It's whatever you're comfortable with, that's the real thing.
The half face is kind of like a 95.
The good thing about this,
It's just a
I would recommend you
Usable.
use one of these. One reason, it's cost effective. This is a one and done, you throw it away, you spend $30 on another box. This one is better protection than this. And if you clean it and maintain it, it lasts a long time versus this.
Yeah, during
So-
COVID, there was a shortage on the N95, so we weren't even using N95s, we
So with this guy right here, when we're done for the day, we will work it, and we'll come back, and we have this with us, right? So we know that this could have some contaminant on it, because we worked. We come back, we know we're gonna leave our junk bags over here in the corner. How do I care for this? I can't just, this is where the problem happens. We can't just take this and put this in the bag with a clean PPE, right?
No, you gotta clean it.
We gotta clean it.
Water and warm soap.
Mild soap and warm water is the easiest
Water
way to
and
do it.
soap, not warm soap.
Yeah.
Just go to the bathroom and
Mild soap and water, take it, clean it with your hands, run it
So
in
now,
there,
what if we don't
run it
have,
under water.
say, soap or water on the job? But do we clean it with,
You have, EPA, disinfectants,
Yeah.
Vanquish and Suboxide.
You store it in a bag
There you go.
until you can find a location back here where you can properly clean it.
But technically you
Because
can,
then you don't wanna put that in your PPE bag and contaminate everything.
Bring it right back to the
but
office.
technically you can disinfect it with that product.
Clean it right in the sink.
But again, like he said, you're supposed to use the recommended guidelines set forth for the mask or soap and water. So now you're putting a disinfectant that this company doesn't know of on that mask. What happens if you're working and the seals rot away? That's the thing.
No, but I'm
There's-
saying our disinfectant.
Yeah, there's,
Our
so,
disinfectants.
They don't know about our disinfectant.
there's two sides of the coin in this conversation, which is good open dialogue, which is cool. You can use those products for decontamination, right? If that was to be deconned before you take it off, okay? Which is what you could be saying. Then he's correct, that it would still then need to come back here and be cleaned with mild soap and water after that, okay? But you would never clean something like this with any of those products and then put it in a bag, right?
Yeah,
You would never do that.
because you have to put it back in your face.
Correct. That, we don't know what any of those compounds could potentially do to the rubber pieces of the material that's on that mask. That's why it's the manufactured, anything that's a life safety device, is manufacturer's recommended for mild soap and warm water. Okay. Anything else in your bag, Steve, or is that basically it?
That's pretty much it.
You guys have any questions? Peter?
No, this was great. Thank you so much, guys.
So again, yeah, thanks.
Sorry. A little
No,
early.
you're good. I just want to reiterate, we want to make sure that when you get to the point when you have your bags, if you guys have a bag now, make sure it's here every day. Okay?
Yeah, so Steve and I are gonna work together on getting bags for the rest of you guys. We have bags, but we just need to put them together. And like you said, we'll have, you guys can line up your bags every day here, right there on that wall. And that's it.
is all this stuff that we get or you provide?
I
I know the
pro-
suits you provide.
We provide everything that's gonna be in that PP bag. The tools, you guys provide. Yeah, there's a sign-in sheet, guys. Just make sure you sign in. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, make sure you sign in.